Good morning, good evening. Whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you might be doing, we wish to thank you for joining us for the Silverlight Show. The Silverlight shines to illuminate that which lies hidden in shadow. If you're listening on our affiliate, the Life Online radio station at lifebroadcastingcenter.com, we welcome you in. If you're listening on YouTube on the Silverlight channel, we welcome you in. A special thanks goes out to the sponsor of this episode, Affinity Writing and Editing Services. If you write anything, they can help. You can find them on Twitter at AffinityWES. That's AffinityWES. Now, this will be a slightly different episode from our usual episode because it's a disturbing event that we'll be talking about. Over the past little while, there has been quite a lot of discussion about police matters and police. Now, as we know, Black Lives Matter is trending worldwide, and while I have questions about some of their practices, the fact is the message is real. People of color do actually have a problem, and I can say this from personal experience. A number of years ago, I went camping with two friends of mine, a Persian fella and a Trinidadian fellow. We were having a good weekend, just having a couple beers by the campfire, doing what guys do when guys are out in the forest. While we were sitting there, cooking hot dogs for the record, the police came into the park and approached us. They came right to us. They didn't look at anybody else, nothing. They came straight to our campsite. And they said, "We're here to check you for weapons." Well, the only weapons we had were the knives and forks that we had to eat with. It's Algonquin Park. It's pretty civilized. So we let the police check, and after they'd gone through, they left us. They were relatively friendly. I have to say that. They were doing their job. And they mentioned they had received a complaint that we had weapons. Now, my Persian friend, Iranian, whatever you like to call him, he's pretty sharp. And he said, "What kind of weapons?" And the police said that we had been accused by a third party, who we do not know who is to this day. We were accused of having a gun. Now, keep in mind, this is Algonquin Provincial Park. Right outside of Algonquin Provincial Park, there are several exclusive hunting camps. The park itself is set aside from camping areas to exploration areas to trails, you name it. And for some reason, amongst all these people, we were the ones suspected of having a firearm for nefarious purposes. They never asked for a license. They never asked for anything. They just came up and wanted to search. Now, at the time, we didn't really think anything of it because we live in the big city and stuff like this happens all the time. But when we were packing up to leave, we realized that our group, had the only minorities in the park. The whole park. There was two of them, my two buddies. And the police never investigated any of the other people there. So, police sensitivity is really an issue that needs to be addressed. Now, I do not begrudge officers the job that they do. It is stressful. It is difficult. They deal with all sorts of people. They have good days and bad days just like us, but the difference is their bad days involve really horrific stuff. We've all seen on police dramas or even reality shows on TV the type of day a police officer goes through. And like I said, I don't begrudge them their job. I think most officers are good. There are a few out there that have questionable motives that are probably in it for the penchant, for the benefits, to get a better desk than anybody else. But I think more than 50% of the officers are good people. Past that, I wouldn't want to place my bets on any particular number. But going back to the real topic of today, it's how police choose to handle certain situations. And this is why I'm here at 4 o'clock in the morning recording this, because I found out about this and it made me sick to my stomach. Last Friday in Salt Lake City, there is a 13-year-old boy who was seriously injured after being shot by police officers. Now, this 13-year-old boy had severe autism, which I'm sure, as you realize, autism and indeed a lot of conditions in that spectrum in Down syndrome, they're becoming more and more widespread. Whether you believe this is because there's chemicals being put in our water, whether you believe this is because we're detecting it better, whatever you may believe, the fact is the case numbers are going up. So, in general, we all have to learn to deal with autistic people and people on other behavior spectrums than what we would consider the norm. Although, to be honest, to quote the great Pascal, man is so necessarily mad that not to be mad would form another kind of madness. So my humble opinion is that everybody suffers from some sort of disorder. It's just that there's deviations from the mean, and there are far deviations which result when your behavior patterns aren't in line with the public. Now, all that being said, this poor autistic boy was having a bad day. His mother had gone back for the first time in nearly a year. Remember, since the whole quarantine started and things got into the condition that they are now, this whole time, mental health services have basically been on hold. Not because the doctors don't want to help, but because it's very difficult to get to all the cases. It's in fact very difficult even to quantify all the cases. I know quite a few people who are psychologists in a social manner, and they have all said they have no idea how they're going to cope with everything once everything opens back up. It's intimidating to the mental health professionals. And the problem is, people in the regular world, like you or I, a policeman, a person in the donut shop, is not trained to deal with a person of severe disability. Now, I've taken first aid courses. I know what to do in case of a seizure. I know with an autistic person, they may have a difficult day or whatever, and there's basically nothing you can do. You got to let them understand they're okay, they're safe, calm them down, and that's the essential goal of mental health for non-professionals. However, this particular mother, having just come home from work, her first day of work in over a year, she suddenly realizes her son has had a bad day. He's screaming, he's running around, he's having a little bit of a fit. Now, a lot of my audience is in the older age bracket, but we are all young ones. And 13 years old, whether you're genius honors A student or whether you are qualify as another classification, it's a very strange time for your world to change. Your mother suddenly goes away for the first time in a year, during which, depending on your level, no matter your level of concentration or of comprehension, you know something is wrong. Even people without senses have been able to tell over the past year something has been out of whack. And they're right to feel that way. I'm a firm believer that you're always right to feel the way that you do, because your feelings are out of control. You're out of your conscious control. If somebody cheated on you, broke up with you, whatever it is, it's right to feel betrayed. For you not to feel that way, you wouldn't be human. Emotions are such an integral part of the human experience that not feeling emotions makes you an alien. You would not be human. You would be something different. Just like Mr. Spock on Star Trek had to be an alien, or half alien in his case, that way he could repress his emotions. And they even had to retcon that, saying even he had emotions, he just repressed them. But getting back to our point, this young autistic lad is unfortunately going through a very trying time. A 13-year-old of any sort would be going through a difficult time right now, and suddenly his mother is gone. Let's pretend she worked an 8-hour shift. That's 8 hours of absolute hell for somebody in that situation when your support network that's been there for a full year suddenly disappears. He reacted badly, but at the same token, it's not really his fault. Like I said, you're never wrong to feel the way you do. Because of that, he was lashing out. Since mental health services are as strained as they are, his mother did the only thing she could think of and called the police for help. Now, she told the dispatcher, the person who answered the phone, that her son was autistic and she just needed help calming her son down. So the officers who responded are aware they have an agitated young male with a disability, and they're going into that with knowledge ahead of time. This is where things start to get a little bit uncomfortable for me, because I'll continue with the story. Whatever happened, the young gentleman tried to escape, and unfortunately, he was shot. Now, I have to question at this point if the police are going into a situation where they have a disabled young person who is experiencing emotions and is reacting badly. Why did they have guns drawn? This is what disturbs me the most. A person who is police with guns drawn basically are expressing the threat of force. They're saying, we have the ability to put you down, and we're showing you these weapons and our intention to put you down if necessary. This is a pretty good threat for most people. I'm going to put my hands up. I have no intention of fighting police. Anybody who has ever played a video game or watched the cops on TV, whatever the case may be, fighting the police is a bad idea. But that's because my concept of the normal world is more in line with what is normal. Not completely, but it's relatively normal. So I know not to fight the police. In this young man's mind, again, 13-year-old, upset because his mother's not there, suddenly these two strangers are barging in. And he doesn't know them. Police officers on the road are generally pretty well built. They work out, they take care of themselves. I say nothing about their diets, but they do a pretty good job. So here is this young man who is suddenly confronted by two strangers he doesn't know. Now, for context, imagine for a second you were a foreigner that didn't speak English. You somehow stuck out and you couldn't quite comprehend what was going on around you. Suddenly, two strangers with weapons come in. You're naturally going to freak out a little bit. And the fact that this young man decided to run, I think, is highly rational. Well, rational might not be the right word, but at the same token, it is very understandable. So when the officer decided to shoot him, I find it very difficult to justify that decision. Now, again, I have to say the officers had been informed that the boy was, quote, having a psychological episode, and they knew about that. The officers, in turn, claimed that this young man had a weapon. Again, I find this highly suspicious because the mother says he didn't have a weapon. The mother is fighting this and saying, we need to have an investigation, and the officers have made up this weapon out of nowhere. I'm going to be honest with you. And it's despicable, honestly disgusting activity on their behalf. The young man, the 13-year-old, did make an unfortunate decision in trying to run and trying to escape. And when he was yelling at his mother, he probably did say some unpleasant things. But his injuries show me that the officer who shot him offloaded his entire magazine. He had injuries to his shoulder, ankle, intestines, bladder, and colon. So unless you have some sort of a magic bullet there, that's at least minimum 3 shots landing on him, and possibly more depending on where in the intestines, the bladder, etc. That's a very tricky area, but minimum 3 shots. That shows an officer overreacting well and beyond what is expected. Even had this 13-year-old picked up a baseball bat, even had he done any of that, there is no excuse to pull a gun, much less fire it. Again, the officers were told there was a man with a disability, psychological issues. I understand police officers go through a lot. I honestly do. And I wish the world was a better place and they didn't have to. But the fact is, that night, they decided to do something heinous, unconscionable, and shoot somebody who doesn't know what is going on. So right now, that 13-year-old is sitting in a hospital, in pain, not understanding what happened, and just because one policeman decided that he was going to shoot. Little bit of disclosure here. I've been on duty not as a police officer, but a member of the armed forces. And I was in an exercise where I accidentally did fire my weapon. Truth be told, it was minus 40 degrees outside. I had mittens on that were huge. We had the trigger guard off, and I had just been through a very upsetting day myself. My tent had burned down because the Coleman stove inside had malfunctioned. I was a mental and physical wreck at that point. That being said, I was holding an M16, a fully automatic weapon. And when I fired, I only let one shot go because the second that thing popped, I woke up. Well, not woke up, I wasn't asleep, but you know what I mean. It snapped me back into reality, and I did not fire more than one bullet. So, and in that situation, I would have totally been understanding, not justifying, but I would have been understanding and sympathetic had the officer fired one shot. Oops, you're startled, you're frightened, something goes on the wrong way, and this is where I find the difficulty with police lies. There's a situation in Toronto a couple years ago where another mentally unbalanced individual was on a streetcar and he was trying to get off, and one of the officers again emptied his entire magazine into the person. Now granted, this was a little bit scarier situation. This was a fully grown adult. This was not just some kid. And they were threatening harm. But this man wasn't armed. The officers just decided to mow him down. Police officers can't really afford to take chances. I understand they're dealing with their lives and the people they're sworn to protect. But on the other hand, they really have to think, is this the best decision? Like I said, one gunshot will usually make a person go down. You don't need to fill them full of lead. This is not Dirty Harry trying to clean up the streets. This is 2020 when we understand there's all sorts of things. There's drug dealers, there's gangsters, there's the hardcore criminal element. There's the people that are tweaking on bath salts or whatever you have. I'm picking on bath salts because we know that makes people go a little bit nuts. But there's also the people who are genuinely lost, confused. I mean, this could have been an elderly dementia person not understanding just as much as it could have been a person with a 13-year-old with autism. There have been recorded cases where police have shot people with dementia. And it gets more distressing the more you think about it. We've been through 2020. Well, we're not through it yet. I shouldn't count my blessings yet. And it's been a distressing year for everybody. The psychologists that I have been talking to have all said pretty much everybody's going to require some sort of adjustment period, therapy, etc. And there's not a lot of help to go around. So these incidents, as they are only going to increase. With the protests going on in the United States, in Seattle, in all over the place right now, both with the BLM people and with Antifa, there's going to be very, very unfortunate incidents, and there's no nice way to say it. I'm trying to pussyfoot around and say this is going to suck, because it is. The protests are, unfortunately, again, from personal experience in the military, we were called out just to show our presence at a protest. And the protesters, now, in my case, they didn't make any aggressive actions toward us, but they try their best. They yell at you, they call you names, they do everything they can to get under your skin. And this was only a couple days that I had to put up with it, whereas an officer might have to put up with a week, 2 weeks, however long these protests are going on. That's a very different situation than what I went through. But it does show police officers need to be the leaders of the community. Remember the good old days when in the back of the police car and it said to serve and protect? Nobody says that anymore. They've all changed their logos. It changes a bit from place to place, but the serve part has been removed. They don't serve anymore. They are there to protect you whether you like it or not, and they will do it according to their judgment. It's an evolution that is not a very good thing. You might say it's only a slogan, but people choose slogans based around what they want to do. Sports teams do it all the time. Here's our new winning slogan. Anybody who's been in any sort of meeting knows that every company has a mission statement. Whatever that mission statement might be, it's there to reflect a mentality. And right now, the police have a highly militaristic mentality. And this is not a good thing in the present day. This is a very delicate situation we are dealing with. These are tensions that are being fanned by some certain individuals that I'm going to leave for a different show, but they're basically trying to create the racial divides of the 1960s, where you had Charles Manson saying that there was going to be a war between whites and blacks, and he had his own family there to make sure that they were going to survive. And this is the kind of thing they want to have happen. And it comes down where the little people, like I said, this poor young man, the poor people with dementia, people who are caught out of place at the wrong time, are suffering and dying. And it cannot be denied that black people and minorities in general have been and are being targeted. Now, there's reasons for this that are kind of understandable. But the same token, since the police have become militarized instead of public servants, now they say civilian, whereas they are civilians. It's a nonsensical thing to say that they are not civilians, but they think they're above the law. And in fact, special investigation units around the country are kind of a joke. Pretty much any time a police officer investigates another police officer, they're going to find a rationale, back up some sort of excuse. Well, I can respect that. You want to protect your brothers in arms, because there is a very valid argument from the police side that a policeman can't really afford to take time to judge whether this is the threatening situation or not, because by the time he decides it is, he could already be overwhelmed. There's martial arts experts out there, and indeed, police officers will tell you if you're within 20 paces, and anybody out there can go and measure 20 paces, it's actually a fair distance. An officer can't unbuckle his gun, take it out, draw a bead on you, and fire. You can close the distance within 20 paces just by a sprint and a tackle, and the officer would be pretty much unable to defend himself. Please don't try this. I urge you not to try this. This is just what they have said. So, I do understand why a police officer would take their firearm out in a situation where they felt threatened. But there's a lot of non-threatening situation officers get in where the gun is completely unnecessary. Now, I'm not advocating that we put a combination lock or, make it harder for a policeman to get their weapon out. But what I'm saying is, alternatives exist. We have tasers, we have rubber bullets, and most of the time police officers do have to pull a gun. They're not shooting the darn thing. So perhaps rubber bullets should be there, and a quick change slot where you can put real ammunition in. That's one possibility. But the most important thing that we have to think about is officer training. Like I said before, in first aid training, they teach you how to deal with this stuff, and it's basically do nothing, calm them down, reassure them. Police officers in the modern day are not calming anything down. They're not reassuring anybody, whether it's you, me, a black person, a white person, a yellow person, whatever it is. They want to escalate. And it's been the mentality for a good 10, 15 years. They want to arrest first, put you away, and let the judge deal with it, which is not really a bad functional approach, because an officer making a decision on the site may or may not be the right call. And unfortunately, there have been too many cases where an officer decided to leave people alone, and when they come back, the husband or the wife or boyfriend or girlfriend, whatever the situation is, has gotten 1,000 times worse. Which is why officers are now being encouraged to just arrest and let them sort it out later. The problem being, the arrest part is kind of starting to go away in the police officers' vocabulary. They're so intent on pursuing the arrest. That's why we get these shows like Cops, where they have massive car chases and all sorts of spectacular damage, because the police are determined to make that arrest, and they don't care what they have to go through to get it. For those of you who might want to cast your mind back a bit, remember there was that gentleman who stole an armored personnel carrier from the National Guard, and he wreaked havoc through the streets, driving it up and down until he finally got himself trapped, in which case the police had to go in, because the police didn't have any other weapon in their arsenal beside a gun. The police have the most important weapon that they can possibly have: their minds. And that's why I keep saying training is paramount. The officers that are on the street, like I said, at least 50% of them are good, because our society functions in pretty good order. We're not sitting here trying to pay a bribe to a police officer in order to avoid having them pull us over. We're not giving money to the policemen to make sure that we can open our business and not have criminals shake them down. Overall, law and order in our society is pretty good. So my problem is that I think it can be better. A police officer's mind is their best tool. And I don't believe that there are that many dummies in the police force. The police does hire people with a certain mental aptitude. They want them to be smart, them to be able to react, them to be able to adapt. And that is ultimately the kind of police officer that we need. However, in the case of this 13-year-old boy's case, they didn't adapt. They didn't do anything. They just shot and asked questions later. The reason why I'm taking this pretty seriously, given that this is a show that is mostly dedicated to other things, is that this hits very close to home for me. I know lots of people who suffer from anxiety, depression, panic attacks, you name it. I know somebody who's suffered from it. And in those situations, these people are at their most vulnerable. They are perfectly rational and normal like you and I, except they have moments where they are not in control. One of my closest friends in the world has vertigo. And if you ask him to go up a ladder, he's not thinking of himself at that point. He's thinking, I don't want to be here, I'm in a bad situation, need to get out of it, blah, blah, blah. See, I'm purposely speeding my voice up so you can imagine his thoughts. And your thoughts do speed up. Everything does, because you're panicking. This is not what you need in your life. Just like that 13-year-old boy panicked. Just like almost every single case, people panic when they're confronted by police with firearms. And so long as police have a combative mentality, they're going to present their arms as their bargaining chip. That is what they know will work. If they show they have a gun, they get their way. Shouldn't be like that. We need police officers who are able to talk, who are able to negotiate, who are able to listen. Because I've learned in my life, listening is your most powerful weapon. If you sit down and listen to somebody complaining, they can be mad as hell. They can be screaming, calling you every name in the book, but you listen. And if you listen, you will find the one point that has set them off beyond control. Now again, this doesn't work for every single case. I'm talking in a customer service situation, and you listen to that complaint. And if they're saying they don't like the way that something was delivered, I'm just going to pick on that. Okay, find out what the problem was. Was it damage? No, the person was rude. Okay, well, what did the person say to you? But see, just by listening and getting them to converse with you, now they're on board with you. This would be a police officer negotiating with somebody. And negotiation is something we all do at every day with every conversation we have in life. If you say to your significant other that you're going to be staying out late Friday night, there's a negotiation process. Whether immediately they say, yeah, that's fine, or they say, where are you going? Whatever the case may be, that's a sign of a healthy relationship. And the police right now don't have a healthy relationship with the community that they are supposed to be serving. Again, they are civilians that are being entrusted with the care and conduct of law and order in our society. And they need to be reminded of this, not in a violent way, not in a revolution. Let's not defund them. Let's fund them properly. Like I said, alternatives exist. Alternatives always exist. Tasers have been out for a long time. Now, I don't know what decision process the police make, whether to bring out the taser or the gun or whatever it is, but whatever the process is, so many people are being shot. This is something we need to reevaluate. If you'll cast your mind back a couple of years to Trayvon Martin, who was kind of the inspiration for all the present tension, it was at night. There was something strange going on, and he got shot. But that was a situation where dialogue failed and tempers flared. We expect the police to be held to a higher standard because of their training, because of their experience. And we can no longer ignore the spectacle that is mental illness in our society. Given the breakdown of the institutions we've had over the past 6 months, with the lockdown. It's been 6 months of lockdown already, and don't be surprised if we have to go back into it, because there are already people saying, premiers, governors, stuff like that are saying the second wave is coming. So after 6 months of this, people are all on edge. And it's getting worse. People are stressed. People are anxious. People are wondering, am I going to get my job back? People are saying, I lost my job. Will I find another? Can I afford to have to pay my rent? Can I afford to buy food? These are all real things that almost everybody that I'm speaking to here is going through right now. So right now, we might not be in our right mind. We're in, I guess you could call it an altered state of reality. And this is something that goes throughout the entire population. You, me, our grandparents, our friends, our family, and it's scary. It is honestly scary that the human civilization that we are in built itself so high to be able to launch people into space, to travel to Europe in a matter of hours. All these things we can do, but at the same token, we can't control ourselves. It happens every hurricane season. Some sort of hurricane hits the land, and I was the cat, by the way. He's not very happy at the moment. The hurricane hits the land, and all of a sudden everybody starts panicking. And this is the depressing part to our reality. People, unfortunately, no matter where we are just human. We are glorified apes. We are only one step removed from swinging through the branches, picking fruit, and picking fights with each other because we don't like that somebody has a higher status than we do or got a better bit of fruit. Believe me, it's on the next evolutionary train over, the chimpanzees. They are known to have all of our vices. They get angry, they fight, they'll even kill one another. But there's also something else very special on that branch, on that one evolutionary branch over. Those are the bonobos. Bonobos are they used to be called pygmy chimpanzees, but they have an entirely different social structure. Whereas chimpanzees organize, they go to war, they do all sorts of crazy stuff that we do. Chimps have been known to smoke, chimps have been known to do everything humans can, and they can be trained. Bonobos are pretty peaceful. They spend their time resolving conflict through intergroup relations while chimps are fighting things out. And both of these groups share about 98 to 99% of our genetic code. So, if on just the next branch over on the evolutionary tree, we have two examples of very, very human behavior, one being warlike, one being very peaceful, we need to be working ourselves more towards the bonobos, the peaceful ones, than the chimpanzees. Now, you almost never hear about bonobos in the media. We're always compared to chimps, even though, like I said, bonobos are virtually identical to us genetically. I mean, there's more genetic variance between the species of dogs than there are between chimps, bonobos, and us. And think about how common dogs are. They can all interbreed, they can all do everything. We can't do that because we're all special. And indeed, chimpanzees and bonobos, they have their disabled infants too, which don't really survive as well because they're living in pre-hunter-gatherer, pre-everything a human. Basically, they're living about 5 million years in the past of the different evolutionary path than what we are taking. So, once again, bringing everything back, a chimpanzee's response is very guttural. It's very violent. It is, someone is threatening me, I'm going to take action. And going back to our 13-year-old, the policeman reacted like a chimpanzee. Someone is threatening me, I'm going to take action because I need to be boss. We need bonobos. We need the answer that, okay, this person is upset, what can we do to calm them down? The mother was right there. The mother knows that boy better than anybody, and the best thing for them to have done would be, okay, you need our help, what has worked before? And the mother would say, well, usually he gets distracted by TV, video games, silly YouTube videos, whatever it might be. And the officer would have said, well, let's try that. There are all sorts of non-violent ways for this episode to have concluded. Unfortunately, the officers are choosing that chimpanzee mentality. The I'm going to bare my chest out and thrust you out of my territory mentality. Mental illness, as I said at the beginning of the episode, is part of the core of who we are. Man is so necessarily mad that not to be mad would be another form of madness. We're all insane. We live in an insane world and we are naturally insane ourselves. The important point is most of us can get along and agree on the basic points of insanity that we exist in. So, as long as we can talk and discuss our mutual madness, that is what we need to do. We need to be establishing connections between not just the police, but the government and ourselves. Because the police are part of government, but they also have the ability to do things government can't. For example, a policeman can go into a school and say, I am officer so-and-so, I represent this is what I do for a living, and the kids in that school will kind of get an idea what they're doing. The person at the the license renewal place, the Department of Transportation, whatever you might want to call them, can't really do that. They're just a mysterious person behind a desk. The person in the courtroom doesn't really have a chance to express themselves besides just fill this form out, punch here, sign here, do this. That is basically the limit of what they can do. And again, this is one of the things that has gotten worse in the past 20 years. Governments have become far more standoffish. I don't want to say bad things about people. I try very hard not to, but the fact is, once you're sitting behind a glass reinforced window and, bulletproof glass in some cases, you can act pretty snarky, because at that point, honestly, you don't care. Nothing's going to affect you. So we need the government and the police to start re-engaging with the community. We need the community in return to welcome them in, because it's hard to take that first step. And that first step towards peacemaking should always be welcomed with open arms. This is one of the biggest conflicts or problems we've had that start conflicts in the past 7,000 years, is that we don't accept peacemaking when it is offered. Peacemaking, if we adopted a peacemaking mentality instead of a warrior mentality, these situations would happen far less. We would be looking to incorporate other people, no matter their state of mind, into our own. Look at the media at the moment, and right now, you would be under the impression that conservatives and liberals were at the opposite ends of the political spectrum and fighting like madmen. Conservatives and liberals are actually not that far apart on the political spectrum. They're not fascists, they're not communists, they're middle of the pack realistically. They disagree on a few things, which they hold key, but like I said, they're basically shooting up the middle. But they portray themselves as these extreme champions of opposite ends. It's part of the madness of our culture that we believe them. And madness is part of our culture. We have the Kardashians who are announcing the end of their TV show. To be honest, I don't know when it started. The only reason I know that it's ended is that somebody put it on my Facebook page. And my only knowledge of them is the fact that they had a TV show and they're apparently famous. But somehow there's this segment of the population out there that's obsessed with celebrities and everything that they do. The celebrity I have always liked the most was Charles Barkley. And the reason is, while everybody was saying, be like Michael Jordan, be like this, Charles Barkley said, don't be like me, be yourself. And that's something I think most people have forgotten. We're so busy watching Tom Brady, where he's going, what he's doing. We're so busy. Harrison Ford is a little bit of an older example, and he's not really very controversial. Clint Eastwood, there we go. Clint Eastwood's done some pretty controversial stuff. Mel Gibson, he's done some very controversial stuff. And people would rather spend their time obsessing over what they're doing, where they're going, who they're seen in public with, than actually realizing that they should be thinking of ideas themselves. Don't listen to celebrities. Well, that's not true. Listen to them, but don't take them as authorities on anything. Bono has a very good idea of feeding the world. But besides that, he's got some cracked out ideas in his head, just like the rest of us. He makes fantastic music. I like the way that he tries to do good in the world by feeding hungry children in Africa. Both are very laudable goals, but past that, I don't care. Whether he's going out with a woman, man, whatever, to alien, couldn't care less. Let him live his life. And the same is true for any other celebrity out there. Mel Gibson said some pretty heinous things, and I understand now why he has to fund his own movies, but ultimately, I remember him as a mildly amusing character in Lethal Weapon. That's where my interest starts and ends with him. I don't think he's a necessarily great director, but You get these people who are so obsessed with celebrity culture, which is polarizing. It's naturally polarizing. Because people are always going to say, who is better, person A or person B? Who's better, Superman or Batman? Who's better? The first second you start getting into that celebrity culture, you naturally become polarized. You start losing your own mind trying to figure out who is the best at whatever it might be. And you know what? Humans have one thing that separates us from most of the other animals, and that is our ability to cooperate. And cooperation really makes our society work. That's why I can sit here in my basement at 4:41 in the morning and talk about police without any fear of reprisals. There was a time in my lifetime where in Russia, if I had done this, I would have been arrested. There are places in the world right now where people are getting arrested. I have a friend who did some time. I have a lot of friends, by the way. I'm very proud to say that people, for some reason, like me. But he went to Saudi Arabia, and his wife was completely not allowed to leave the compound. I am very grateful when my significant other decides to go out, and she brings back groceries and little things, and, we have a good life between the two of us. But there's a lot of places where that would be unconscionable. I've always said, if you need to cover your woman up to keep you from having impure thoughts, it's not the women's problem, it's the men's problem. But I'm getting a little bit off track here. Coming back to my original point, what happened to this 13-year-old is symptomatic of what's happening to everybody at the present time. The police, the government, everybody is just ignoring people with disabilities and mental illnesses. It's easier just to slap them in a body bag and deal with them another way. Unacceptable in my opinion. Just unacceptable. And unfortunately, at the present time, I think it's only going to get worse. It would take a very, very big step for us to move forward and to rebuild from this. And this is my plea to everybody listening out there. You know what? There are conspiracies. There are evil people in the world. There are things you need to worry about and things you need to think about. But right now, the most important thing is to get along with each other. Be kind to one another, as my uncle says. Because if we start being kind to each other, maybe, just maybe, we can make this world a better place. We wish to thank you for joining us on the Silverlight Show this week. If you have any questions, concerns, if you want to get a hold of us in any way, please send an email to silverlightservices, that's all one word, lowercase, silverlightservices@gmail.com. We thank you all for tuning in, whether it be on YouTube or on the Life Online Radio Network at lifebroadcastingcenter.com. And once again, thank you for your time. Have a great week.